10 o'clock Thursday morning. Let's welcome in our good friend Randy Hoffman. Good morning, Randy. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Jay. I'm great. How about you?
Good. Thanks for asking. Well, History Talk is back. We are live, and this week we are talking, election. The election is coming up, and we're going to talk politics, North Dakota politics, in fact, more importantly. And let's start, Randy. Let's start with North Dakota's political leaning. It's been complicated in the past now, hasn't it?
Yeah, I felt a little bit appropriate to be talking about this with the election coming up next week. Everyone, I think North Dakota politics are really interesting because everyone today, especially today, think of North Dakota being this real deep red conservative Republican state. And that is definitely true today. But it's actually pretty recent that we've become that deep red. Now, that's not to say Republicans have never been influential in North Dakota politics, because they have been from before we were even a state, but they haven't been as dominant as they are now, which I think is really, really interesting. I mean, if you look at today, though, all three of our national representatives in Congress are Republican. Our governor is Republican. And even looking at our state house, 89% of our state legislature is Republican. So obviously, we are a deep red Republican state today. And we voted red for president for many decades, too. But it's actually been pretty recent. And there's a lot of very interesting parts of our politics that actually lean not just liberal and progressive, but even socialist.
Yeah, I guess Heidi Heitkamp, we were thinking about this the other day. She was one of our senators up until, what was it, 2016, wasn't it?
I'm trying to remember the year that she was outvoted. I think it was 18, actually, because it was already...
Okay.
Because 16 is when Trump was elected for his first term, and she was
right.
In the House because part of why she lost re-election was her opposition to one of President Trump's Supreme Court picks. So she obviously had to have been in there at least 2 years. I want to say it was probably 2018 that she lost her re-election.
Gotcha. The modern Republican dominance, so other than presidential, which hasn't voted Democrat, this is interesting. Since 1964, LBJ was the last time that the state voted. Is it voted Democrat?
Right. Yeah. And that's what's part of what's really interesting about North Dakota politics is, when I grew up, all three members of our Congress were Democrats, and that actually was the case until fairly recently here. But we voted Republican for president all the way back through until 1964 is the last time we voted for a Democrat candidate for president, which was LBJ. And even that, was a little bit of an anomaly because LBJ actually won all but 6 states. So, I mean, he swept through the nation. So we just kind of got on that bandwagon, And before that, I think it was FDR was I think probably the only other candidate for a Democratic candidate North Dakota ever voted. So we've always, with a very few exceptions, voted Republican for president. But that's what's really interesting. We also voted until very recently Democrat for our other national representation. So we're really a mixed bag, but it's also not accurate to say that we're a purple state. When you think of a purple state, that means that we have leans back and forth between the two, where it's been consistent that, Republicans have always had a stronger influence than Democrats in North Dakota. It just wasn't as strong as it is today.
That's right. I was talking with Rick Clayberg here last week concerning that, how we had we had 2 House members and a senator that were Democrats, which is incredible, right? I mean, that's up until just, how many years ago was that we lost our last Democrat as a senator? Well, I guess we just talked about it. It was Heidi.
It was Heitkamp, and I'm pretty sure that was 18 that she lost that, and then of course the turnover would have been January of 19. But before that we had Byron Dorgan in 2011, I believe. Probably in 2010 that he was voted, or I think he just stepped down. I think he was voted.
He just stepped down.
He retired, and then of course we had
Pomeroy,
the House seat. Pomeroy in the House seat until he lost to Rick. It was Rick Berg that he lost to just a year or two before Dorgan. So really, up until 2010, I think is about that cutoff when we had all 3 representatives that were Democratic.
A lot of words have been thrown around lately. Fascism, socialism. Randy, is North Dakota a socialist state?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up because I mean, like, we certainly were not a socialist state by true definition, but we do have some socialist programs that I don't
Hmm.
think people really realize started from the socialist movement in the early 20th century, and they are, by definition, socialist programs. And the biggest of that would probably be Bank of North Dakota. It's the only state-owned bank in the nation, and that was started by the Nonpartisan League. Also, the state-owned mill was started by the Nonpartisan League. And the one way that we can not only looking at the definition of socialist, another way that we can identify them as socialist programs is because the Nonpartisan League was actually the evolution of the North Dakota Socialist Party and part of the socialist movement that swept through not only North Dakota but all of the United States in the early 20th century. But those programs are still in place. The other thing that the Nonpartisan League is credited with is banning corporate farming. Now, that in itself is not a socialist ideal because in order
Hmm.
for it to be socialist, the government has to own and operate it, which they obviously don't own and operate farms. But it was the Socialist Party that banned that, which is still benefiting farmers today in North Dakota.
It's kind of amazing that people that lived their whole lives in this state, let's just for instance, we'll go back to 2008 when President Obama was elected, and he was running against at that time, oh gosh, the senator from Arizona,
It was McCain, I believe, the
McCain.
name.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, running against McCain, and the big talking point was socialism. That Obama was going to bring socialism with his ACA and everything else. But when you told folks you do know that you have socialism or a somewhat socialism in your own state, they have no idea. They're like, "What are you talking about? We have a
Yeah,
state-owned bank."
and Bernie Sanders too was, I mean, he was probably even more known to be, I mean, he even is a self-identified socialist,
Yeah.
but people don't really understand what socialism is. A lot of times they interchange it with communism. They're connected, but they are different things. And the fact that Republicans are very anti-socialist, farmers in particular are usually very, very conservative, but yet they benefit from the Bank of North Dakota and the state-owned mill, which were both socialist programs implemented by a socialist party.
That's right. Well, let's talk about that Socialist Party, the Nonpartisan League. It dominated the politics from the early 1900s through the late 1930s.
Yeah, in the Nonpartisan League, but the name does not mean anything because they obviously were very partisan, and it's a very interesting story. And actually, part of why North Dakota politics are so interesting is probably because of the Nonpartisan League. So, what's really interesting about the Nonpartisan League, and like you said, so they entered power about 1916 or so, and they dominated North Dakota politics until the 30s. But they continued to be influential all the way through the 50s and 60s until they merged with the Democratic Party, but they really dominated in those, that 15, 16-year span. They actually originated as a branch of the Republican Party, but then
Hmm.
they merged with the Democratic Party in 1956. And some of that, too, is, I mean, what we think of as the Republican Party today and the Democratic Party today, they basically reversed from where they were in the early 20th century. Um, so it's just kind of interesting that this nonpartisan league originated as, first of all, it was the successor of what was called the Socialist Party of North Dakota. So it was a socialist um, party
Right.
originating as a branch of the Republican Party, but then it merged with the Democratic Party. So it's just that whole story is very, very interesting. And so the Nonpartisan League was, the whole idea that was to be against big business and corporate farming and big banking, and it was formed in opposition to Alexander Mackenzie, who dominated politics before the Nonpartisan League. Who was very much a big business, big banking kind of person. It was formed to kind of contradict or counteract Alexander Mackenzie's influence, which already on its own was waning by the time the Nonpartisan League happened, but it was formed partly because of that. And so to kind of give you a perspective of how quickly the Nonpartisan League gained dominance is at the time that the Nonpartisan League, or I mean, or how much dominance they had by the time that they merged with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party only had 5 of the legislative seats in North Dakota. But when they merged with the Nonpartisan League, that grew to 67 within 3 years, which represented 41%. And then it continued to grow too. So really what was happening is the Nonpartisan League was really stealing the influence the Democrats otherwise would have had. And when they merged with the Democrats, that started a 3-decade-long influence of the Democratic Party in North Dakota from the 60s all the way through the early 90s. But it took a merger with the Nonpartisan League for that to happen.
Yeah, incredible. So let's talk about, and I mentioned this earlier, Randy. The state of North Dakota hasn't voted Democrat since 1964. That was LBJ, who won all but 6 states. And can you tell the viewers the very first time that the state of North Dakota voted for a Democrat?
Well, they did vote for Democrat for one of FDR's terms. I don't remember which term it was, and I don't know if that was necessarily the first. I believe it was the first time, but it was the last time before voting for Johnson. And there too, FDR. I'm pretty sure it was not the first term of FDR. It might have been the second or even the third time that he was elected. I don't know the exact. I don't know that exactly, but I do know that at least at some point North Dakota voted for FDR. But again, FDR, his second and especially his third term just kind of swept through the country. So we just kind of got on that same bandwagon that was, throughout the whole country there. But generally, other than those couple of exceptions, North Dakota's always voted Republican for president. And so it's just really interesting that we've always been pretty consistent on wanting a Republican for president. But not so consistent for wanting our national Congress to necessarily be Republican. We have been for the last 20, 30 years, but it was not that case when I grew up.
Right, exactly. Latest election in 2020, 65% were in favor of Trump. Essentially, 2/3 of the population of North Dakota.
Yeah, so I really shows that I mean we've always been pretty strong with supporting a Republican presidential candidate, but that's pretty dominating, and I think just a sign of how deeper red North Dakota is getting in general, because that was actually a slight growth over President Trump's first term. First run at it in 2016. So I mean, 2/3 of the population. It would not surprise me if that margin grows even stronger. In North Dakota, politics is kind of interesting too, because it kind of feels like the further west you get, the redder the state gets.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely tell that. Democratic control of the state Senate back in '94. That was the most recent, and then it's just been nothing but Republican, as you said. Primarily 75-80% of it is Republican held now.
Yeah, and again, a very interesting split, because the Republicans have pretty much always controlled North Dakota's state house, but Democrats used to control North Dakota state Senate, and that was pretty consistent until from the 60s until 1994, and that's when the Republicans also took over the state Senate, and they haven't really looked back. And now they just I don't remember the exact. I think it's like 80-90% of our state representation is now Republican. Governor too, the Democrats controlled except for a one-term period of 4 years. Democrats held the governor's seat of North Dakota from the 60s until 1992, when I think it was when Ed Schaefer took over as governor. But other than a 4-year span, I think like the early 80s, Democrats also were our governor. But again, haven't held that seat since 1992. So it just shows how much more and more red our state has become over the last 30 years.
Yeah, Governor Sinner, I think, was our very last Democratic senator at that time. Let's see, what else do we got here? You've got pretty much Al Olson, one single 4-year term, as you said there, from 81 to 84 was, and then that was democratically held pretty much throughout the other. The only governors that I remember Art Link, remember Al Olson, Sinner, and then, of course, I remember all of our current going on from Hovind and on. But I don't remember anything else from the 70s.
Yeah, and I mean, 70s are before my time, too, and I don't really know the 70s that well. But I believe the first Democratic governor was William Guy in the 60s. And, of course, our federal building now is named after William Guy. But I'm pretty sure he was the one that really tipped that scale and became the first Democratic governor in North Dakota, and he held that through pretty much all the 60s. And then Art Link, I think, actually was late 70s when he took over that role. I don't remember the exact year, but I think that was late 70s that Art Link took over.
Okay. Of course, the election coming up on Tuesday. Have you voted already, or will you be walking up Tuesday afternoon to do your voting, or Tuesday morning?
Yeah, I'll definitely do it on Tuesday. I have not taken the opportunity to do that ahead. There's something kind of magical and special and meaningful about voting on election day. You know, standing in line with everyone else and
Yeah.
doing it the same. We've been doing it for 200 some years.
Yeah, I was talking with one of our coworkers, and they did some early voting yesterday, I believe, at the Civic Center, and they said quite a line there. Early voting is busy. Can you imagine what election day is going to be like?
Right, and that's good to see. And I've heard that too. I think we even did a story on how how popular the early voting has been down at the event center. It's good to see.
Yeah, it's good to see everybody out voting. Randy, thank you so much. Before we let you go, let's talk about what we've got planned for next week. Another live episode of History Talk. What do you got for us next Thursday morning?
So we're starting next week, and then the week after that, I've got a two-part series basically on the founding of Bismarck and kind of the formative years of Bismarck. It's actually probably my favorite topic to talk about. I'm surprised I haven't had this conversation yet before, but our founding was very, very interesting, and definitely some of my favorite stories of Bismarck's history involved the first year or so of Bismarck's existence, which it wasn't even Bismarck that first year, it was Edmonton. But I just love the story of our founding, and really kind of the first few years leading up to us becoming capital.
All right, we'll look forward to that. Again, next Thursday, you can catch History Talk Thursday mornings, 10 a.m. with Randy and myself right here on the KFYR Plus News Desk. Randy, I hope you have yourself a great week, and we'll catch up with you again next Thursday morning, okay?